Right. He who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a personality as Srinivas Acharya gone? Jai. Shri Vaishnav Thakur ki jai. So today we have the disappearance day of a very unusual Vaishnava and a very wonderful Vaishnava. Sometimes he's called the king of devotees, Syamananda Pandit. So his story, the story of his... The story of his life and experiences is very different from, most of the acharyas that we study, because he got some very, very, very special mercy in his life that changed everything for him. So he was born in South India in a place called Ambika Devi, and his parents were Ambika Devi and Krishnanandan. So it was a very exalted Vaishnava family. So unfortunately, before he was born, all his brothers and sisters had taken birth and left immediately, left their bodies. So his mother was so concerned when this child had made his appearance. So she decided she would call him Dukhi. Dukhi means distress. But she was thinking, if I call him Dukhi, distress, then Yamaraj won't come and take him. Somehow or another that was her. Just like Prabhupada's mother. She made a vow when Prabhupada was born, I'll always eat with my left hand until he asks me why. And that way I know he'll live, because he has to ask me why, and then I'll eat with my right hand. Anyway, so she called him Dukhi. So he was highly intelligent, highly philosophical from when he was tiny. His teachers were astonished because he was so expert in poetry and rhetoric and Sanskrit grammar. And he loved Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. He just relished their pastimes so much. So as he grew up a little, he decided that he had heard about Hridaya Chaitanya, who was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, and he wanted to take his shelter. So he left South India and he travelled to Bengal, to Ambika Kalna, which is the place where Hridaya Chaitanya was living. So when he first entered that ashram of Hridaya Chaitanya, actually Hridaya Chaitanya was speaking at the time, and he immediately bowed down and offered obeisances and sat there very humbly listening. And he was just very happy to be in his association. He loved so he was a very humble devotee, and he liked to sweep the Rasa Mandala area every day. And Hridaya Chaitanya was very taken because he was such a saintly young Vaishnava devotee. And he used to give him special attention. So his service was that he would go to the Ganga, and he'd have big pots. He would carry a big pot on his head, and he would take that back and water the garden of the deities. That was his service every day. And he relished that he'd go several times and he would look after that garden very nicely. But he also liked to spend lots of time alone chanting. He was very attached from young age to the holy name of the Lord, and he would relish just chanting the holy name. So it's described that as he was going to the river to every day to bring back these pots. He developed actually some sores on his head, but he was so transcendental he never bothered about them. They got really infected, but still he continued on. So he was always beyond his body, had that understanding of it's not the body. So at one stage, Hriday Chaitanya, after he'd been there about 1 year, he initiated him. So he gave him the name Dukhi Krishna Das. And Dukhi Krishna Das used to render personal service to his guru. He was very happy to do that. Plus he did his other service. He was very conscientious. But after some years he was feeling the desire to go to Vrindavan Dham. He knew that the Goswamis, some of them were still there, and he really wanted to go and associate with those beautiful devotees and take shelter of the holy Dham. So he approached Hriday Chaitanya, and immediately Hriday Chaitanya knew there was a big request coming. But of course he gave his blessings. Yes, please go to Vrindavan. And not only that, he gave him a cloth which Lord Chaitanya had actually worn, and he tied it around his head for the journey. So he had Lord Chaitanya's mercy on his head, and he gave him prasad. So he began that journey. He was not worried about eating during that journey. He was simply absorbed in the holy name, and the fact that he was heading from Vrindavan made him completely ecstatic on that journey. So when he arrived at Mathura to see those wonderful pastimes, again he was like fainting in ecstasy and crying, and he went to all the birthplace, Vishramgat, and various pastime places so happily, and then the next morning again he was ecstatic because he was thinking he was going to Vrindavan. So he walked to Vrindavan, and when in the distance he saw the flag of Govinda Dev Mandir, he fell down on the ground ecstatic and was crying, and then he ran on to that Govindaji Mandir. So he was very, very happy to be in Sri Vrindavan Dham. So he then went to Govardhana Hill. He went to Syamakund, Radhakund, and he circumambulated Govardhana Hill. So on the way around Govardhana Hill, he was very curious, where is Raghunath Das Goswami? He so wanted to meet Raghunath Goswami. So he asked the locals to please direct him. And of course we know Raghunath Das had a cottage right on the banks of Radhakund, and right next to that cottage was Krishnadas Kaviraj. They lived side by side on the banks of Radhakund. So Dukhi Krishnadas was so honoured and so respectful towards Raghunath Das Goswami, and they spoke for some time. Raghunath Das was encouraging him so much. A beautiful. Everyone was struck when they first saw Syamananda. Dukhi Krishnadas as he was, because he was so beautiful and effulgent, and you can feel that, you can tell that purity. Just like everyone was struck when they saw Srila Prabhupada. If Srila Prabhupada was just walking through the airport, all sorts of, we'd be there, to greet him. Devotees all around the world would go and greet Srila Prabhupada when he came to the airport. But anybody who saw Srila Prabhupada was like struck, whatever they were doing, the other passengers, the porters. It's not like you could just look at Prabhupada and look away. Everyone would be struck. So in the same way, this Dukhi Krishnadas was very striking. And then Raghunath Das said to him, please go next door. Would you like to meet Krishnadas Kaviraj? Oh, yes, he was so thrilled. So Krishnadas Kaviraj at the time was very old, he was writing in his 90s, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he was in deep meditation, very thin and old. When he came in and he offered respects, and he sat there waiting for Krishnadas Kaviraj to come out of his meditation. And after 2 hours, Krishnadas Kaviraj woke, and Dukhi Krishnadas offered his obeisances and was glorifying Krishnadas Kaviraj, and Krishnadas Kaviraj was like, why are you offering me respect? You're giving me pain. Because he was so humble. and he blessed him for his time there in Vrindavan. So then he went to meet, of course, the big preacher at the time in Vrindavan was Jiva Goswami. So he went to meet Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami was so kind to him. He said, "You can stay here. You can have your prasad, you can do your bhajan, you can stay here. I'll teach you shastras." So he was so happy that he'd sort of, come to Vrindavan and everything was as he'd hoped, with these saintly devotees assisting him and giving him so much encouragement. So he actually did find another place to stay, but he began studying under Jiva Goswami, and he relished that. Of course, he had a perfect memory and was very much in contact with all these instructions. He was such a heart-strong devotee. That these teachings would go to his heart. So, especially he liked Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Ujjvala Nilamani. He was thrilled with those. So his guru, Hridaya Chaitanya, was in a relationship of Sakha. So, because that was his guru, was Gauridas Pandit. Gauridas Pandit was a very close associate of Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. So he was very special, and that was his relationship. He had a relationship with Krishna Balaram, and so did Hridaya Chaitanya. But as Ruhi Krishnadas was listening to these beautiful pastimes coming from the nectar of devotion, Ujjvala Nilamani, he became very attracted to these pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Because, as we know, these things they're heart matters. So someone can say to you, "Oh, you should be in this relationship with Krishna," but it's your heart that dictates that. So, sometimes he wrote essays on devotional service under Jiva Goswami's guidance. So in the end, Jiva Goswami could see him becoming so attracted to Radha Krishna, so he gave him a Radharani mantra to chant. And Jiva Goswami also gave him the Gayatri mantra. So Jiva Goswami was his Siksha Guru, but he gave these mantras to him because he could tell he's a very elevated soul. So he liked to go to Seva Kunj, and he would like to sweep the Kunj. He had this pastime where he'd go, and he also had a spade. He would sort of dig and make it nice and soft and sweep Seva Kunj. So, and he also spent a lot of time in meditation. In the night time, after he'd been studying and he'd go home, in the night time he would sit and he would meditate on the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So one night he had a dream. And in that dream, he saw that Radha and Krishna were dancing. And they were singing. And all the gopis were there. And they formed a big circle. And they began this beautiful dance. We know this is the rasa dance. So he was there and he was having darshan. And he was amazed, overwhelmed, crying as he was watching this beautiful Rasa Leela pastime, such a confidential pastime that he saw. And then when that was over, he awoke and he went to Seva Kunj with his spade and his broom. And he began to sweep there. And he could actually see, when he first went there, he saw fresh footprints of Krishna. We know Krishna's footprints and Radharani's footprints are very different from everybody else's footprints. They've got various marks on them. And he could see these, so he was ecstatic. And he began sweeping in ecstasy, sweeping the kunj. And then he noticed this, something golden on the ground, and with his spade he kind of dug a little bit, and up he pulled this beautiful golden jeweled anklet. So actually when Radha and Krishna had been dancing in their rasa dance, they were all very ecstatic and absorbed. Nobody noticed that Radharani's left anklet had fallen off. And when he picked up this anklet, he could smell the fragrance was overwhelming. It was pervading the atmosphere. So he was thrilled and when he touched it on his head, his whole body got like a current of ecstatic, like electricity goes through you, but this was a current of ecstasy going through all his limbs as he put this anklet on his head. So he was pretty, amazed and sort of intoxicated by this fragrance and amazed at this beautiful anklet. In the meantime, Srimati Radharani noticed that her anklet was gone. And she asked Lalita, I want you to go in disguise and I want you to go to Seva Kunj and find my anklet. So Lalita Devi dressed up as a village cowherd lady, and she went there to the Kunj. And when Dukhi Krishna saw her, he could tell by her, and there was such a beauty, like a covered beauty, that she was very special. And she asked him, my sister was here last night, she was picking flowers, and then she heard a lion roaring, and she was so afraid, she ran away, but she lost her ankle bell. And Dukhi Krishna said, who are you? And he said, Lalita said, I am Radha Dasi, and I live in this village, and my sister also lives here, and she's asked me to come. Please, did you find that bracelet? So actually, when I forgot to say that when he picked up and put that bracelet on the head, there was a voice in the ether. Just like Kamsa heard that voice in the ether. Kamsa, you fool. Driving the chariot of your sister, you don't know she's going to kill you. But this voice said, take special care of this anklet. So what he had done is he had wrapped it up in his cloth. So Lalita, or Radhadasi, said, have you seen this anklet? And he said, well, yes, I have. So she asked, can you please give it to me so I can give it to my sister? But he knew this person is not ordinary, she's hiding something. So he said, well, this ankle bell is very costly, and you're a simple village woman, so I'm wondering about this. And Lalita said, well, I'm a village woman, yes, but it's not that we're so poor, but we are just villagers. And still he was suspicious. And in the meantime, Lalita could tell that he was very exalted. So they were both sort of testing one another out. And then Dukhi Krishna said, all right, I'll give the anklet to your sister. I want to meet your sister and I want to hear verification of your story from your sister, and then I'll hand over the anklet. So Lalita was a little frustrated, and then she said, all right, come with me. And she took him to Lalita Kund, and she told him, please take your bath. So Dukhi Krishnadas was, why do I have to take my bath? Just to give this anklet back. So at that time, Lalita knew it was no good. She had to show herself. So she revealed herself as Lalita, and Dukhi Krishna just fainted, because she was so beautiful and effulgent, so he just fainted. And she told, I am Lalita, please take your bath. So immediately he took his bath. And when he came out of the Lalita Kund, he was a gopi. He was dressed as a gopi, and he was ornamented as a gopi, and he was beautiful. No longer was he in that body of Dukhi Krishnadas. So then Lalita took him, and they went to meet her sister. So she also, when Dukhi Krishnadas had fainted, I forgot to say, when Lalita revived him, and she gave him a 15-syllable Radha mantra, which was full of 6 divine opulences. It's described like that. So she emerged as this beautiful Manjari, and both of them then entered into the uppercut Leela. So we know in Vrindavan when we go, we see the rickshaws, we go to Loy Bazaar, this, that. But at the same time, that's what we can see. At the same time, the uppercut Leela, the hidden Leela of Radha and Krishna is going on all the time. So this is what Duhi Krishnadas then was allowed to enter into, because in this Gopi form. So together they went to see Sri Radha. So Sri Radha was sitting on a throne. She was surrounded by Vishaka and all the gopis. And Vishaka, when she saw this beautiful Manjari, she said, "Oh, Kanaka Manjari, welcome home." How beautiful is that day coming. Anyway, so he was so ecstatic, much to the amusement of the gopis, he fainted at Radharani's feet. And so then the gopis thought that was very funny. So then when they came to, Lalita said, "Well, here's my sister, what do you think?" But he was just gazing in wonder. For a start, he was seeing the real Vrindavan. It was so beautiful. He was kind of struck with wonder at that. And then to see Radharani and Lalita and Vishaka and the gopis there, so beautiful, he couldn't even speak. He just took the anklet and he gave it with his right hand to Srimati Radharani. So she took his hand with her right hand, took the anklet with her left hand, and pulled him close. Of course, he was in this gopi body now. And she said, "I'm very pleased with your devotion and your sweeping. I want to bless you with this anklet." So then she took that anklet and she pressed it into his forehead, so that the shape that she pressed into his forehead became the shape of Radharani's foot. And then she took some camphor and musk and saffron and kumkum, and she made a dot, and she put it right in the middle of this tilak on this gopi Manjari. So Lalita said, this tilak is called Sham Mohan. So he had this Sham Mohan tilak on. And Radha said, "From today, your name will be Syamananda, the bliss of Sham. So continue with your service, and one day you will return to serve me." So when she said this, the name Syamananda appeared on his chest. She said, "You cannot take that name away. Please return to the mortal world and share your good fortune with others." So actually, Syamananda couldn't bear, after being in that uppercut Leela with Radharani and the gopis, he couldn't bear to go back. So he just started to weep. "Please don't send me back. Don't send me back." And so Srimati Radharani, we know that she's the most soft-hearted and compassionate. Her heart melted. And from her heart came a deity, a beautiful Tribanga deity. And she gave that deity to Lalita. She said, "This is Shyamasundar." So Lalita gave that deity to Syamananda, the deity of Shyamasundar. Tribanga Shyamasundar. And Lalita said, "As long as you worship this beautiful deity of Krishna, you will never suffer in separation." And she also gave 12 blessings to whoever worshipped this deity. So there's all sorts of those blessings. It's all quite long. But if one goes, that deity is still in the Radhesham temple in Vrindavan. He's small, he's on the left side of the bigger main deities. There are Baladev Vijayabhushan's deities. They're the big ones. So the little ones to the left, that's Radhesham. So the benedictions, I don't think I'll go through them, but you'll go back to Goloka, you'll get the benefit of doing various Rajasuya yagyas and so many Ashwamedha yagyas, and you get the fruits of visiting all the holy places, you get the fruits of every mantra, you get the fruits of visiting all the holy places in the whole universe if you just go and visit this deity. There's so many wonderful benedictions, so if ever you can get to Vrindavan, please go to see Radha Syamasundar. So, and plus the main thing is you'll get prema and you'll come back to Krishna, that's what it says. So we know that Radharani's blessings don't go in vain. So he came back with a deity, this beautiful golden deity from Radharani's heart on his head. The spade that he'd been digging with and touched the anklet with had become golden. And he had this beautiful tilak, effulgent tilak, an effulgent name across his chest. So he came back and he ran to Jiva Goswami. And Jiva Goswami just was so amazed to see him, and he knew some wonderful transformation had taken place. So then Syamananda took him to a secluded place and told him everything. And Jiva Goswami was like, "You are the most fortunate person in the three worlds. No one has got such mercy as this." So he began to worship that beautiful Syamasundar deity. And let's see. Oh yes, the benediction that, well, there were so many benedictions, but Jiva Goswami gave the benediction that Syamasundar will deliver anybody who sees him. So the form of Syamasundar's topmost form in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Raghupati Upajjhaya is talking with Lord Chaitanya and Lord Chaitanya asks, which is the topmost form? So his answer was Syamasundar. This threefold Syamasundar form. So he became quite famous, Syamananda Pandit became famous, and some pilgrims who came to Vrindavan, they heard everything about Syamananda Pandit, and they went back to Bengal and they told Hridaya Chaitanya, "Oh, your disciple has abandoned you. He's taken a new name, not the name you gave. He's also got a new style of tilak, and he's given you up." So Hridaya Chaitanya had given years of very dedicated service to, he'd been a very attentive spiritual master to his disciples, so he was, couldn't quite believe this. So he gathered 64 brahmanas, and they all went to Vrindavan. They held an assembly and they brought Syamananda Pandit. And then he asked, why have you given up your guru? Why have you given up, you've got this new tilak, you've given up your guru, what's going on? So then he said to him, "I'm going to wash off that tilak and that name." So then he washed off the tilak and he washed off the name. No, he didn't do that. He said, "I will." So Syamananda Pandit said, "Please give me one muhurta, 48 minutes. So in that time, he immediately went into meditation and he went into that uppercut lila and he went to Srimati Radha in his gopi form, and he went to Srimati Radharani and said, "Please help me." And Srimati Radharani said to him, "I will help you, don't worry, and I'll protect you." So quietly she whispered to him that Subal Sakhi is Gauridas Pandit's eternal form. He assists us in our pastimes in the kunjas of Vrindavan. So then he went back to his form, and it was seen that his tilak was even more effulgent. It was still, he tried to wash it off, it was still there, even more effulgent. He tried to wash off the name, and it was completely effulgent. So he realized, oh, there's something transcendental here. So then they decided, they made up, and they decided to go on pilgrimage. So they went off, just around Vrindavan, so they went to Sanket. And in Sanket there were some actors and musicians, and they were performing Ras Leela. So it was, they were very expert, and it was very beautiful. The musicians were playing beautifully, and the actors were wonderfully acting. The rasa dance was happening. So Syamananda Prabhu, he started to weep and weep to see it, and he actually started dancing like a gopi. And Hridaya Chaitanya was like, "What are you doing? You're a cowherd boy, you can't do that." And he said, you have to remain, this is you have no place in my Leela. My Leela is friendship. You have to remain in that Leela. And Syamananda Pandit said, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. And Syamananda Pandit then said, your own Guru, Govardhana Pandit, assists Radha and Krishna in meeting in the kunjas. That's his service, even though he's a cowherd boy. And he actually, Hridaya Chaitanya denied it. And he said, no, my Guru never spoke of that to me. And he got really angry with him. He said, I want you to behave like a cowherd boy. And then Syamananda Pandit said, I cannot do it. So he picked up a stick and he beat him 3 times on the back. And then all the devotees were saying, stop, stop, why are you beating him? But Syamananda was so humble. He was saying, oh, this is his mercy. I'm being soothed by his mercy. So everyone was really impressed at Syamananda Prabhu's humility. So that night, in Hridaya Chaitanya's dream, Lord Chaitanya came, and he had 3 strokes across his back. And Hridaya Chaitanya was, oh my Lord, what has happened to you? And he said, Lord Chaitanya said to him, well, you did it. And he's like, what? He said, yes, you beat my second self, my Syamananda. And then Hridaya Chaitanya was lamenting and lamenting, and he said to Lord Chaitanya, I can't be forgiven for this offence. Now I'm going to commit suicide. And Lord Chaitanya said, no need. I want you to make 12 beautiful festivals around Braj, and that will mitigate your offence. So, of course, once he woke up, he went to Syamananda Pandit and he fell at his feet, and everything was made good. And then he made those festivals and returned to Bengal. So, Syamananda Pandit was studying, as we know, under Jiva Goswami. And another 2 exalted souls studying under Jiva Goswami were Narottam Das Thakur and Srinivas Acharya. So they became very close as they studied. They studied all the scriptures of Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, all the Goswami scriptures, and became completely well versed. And then the time came where for them to. Oh no, I've got so many pages here. Anyway, the time came for them to take those books to Orissa, to Bengal, because the Goswamis had been writing all these beautiful books, and the devotees, they had them copied, and they took the copies across to Bengal, because the Gaudiya Vaishnavas in Bengal were just hanging out to get these beautiful books. So they took them on a great big bullock cart. They had 15 soldiers, and off they went. Jiva Goswami went with them as far as Mathura and blessed them. Off they went. So they got to a place called something Vishnupur, and a rascal king ordered his soldiers to bring that treasure, because he'd been told by the astrologer that the treasure was there. So anyway, the books got stolen. And Srinivas Acharya said, I'm going to stay here to try to retrieve the books, because this was their whole purpose. And he told Syamananda Pandit, you go on to Orissa and you preach there. And Narottam Das went to Bengal. So he did that. So he toured through Orissa, and he was such a saintly, pure Vaishnava that just seeing him, people were attracted. And he had such an attachment to the holy names. So he was able to transfer that attachment to others. He took many disciples, and people were just, they had ecstatic kirtans all over Orissa. So this was Syamananda's service to preach the message of the holy name, Lord Chaitanya's message, there in Orissa. So, okay, I've got my things all mixed up here. Okay, so I'll just talk about some of the pastimes that happened in Orissa. For a start, he went back to Vrindavan for a couple of years, and it's said that he spent 15 years in Vrindavan in total, all this studying and returning. And then he had a dream after a couple of years, when because he'd made so many disciples and done such a wonderful job, he brought some of them back to Vrindavan. It's described that he was welcomed back like a returning hero by Jiva Goswami and all the devotees of Vrindavan. So after 2 years there, worshipping his Radhe Shyam, oh, by the way, as he was worshipping Krishna. He had a dream one night that Krishna said to him, my Radharani is appearing and I want to get married to my Radharani. And he was like absolutely mind blown by that. At the same time, the king of Bharatpur, who was a great devotee, had a dream last night in his palace that where Srimati Radharani came, and she said, I am appearing in my form as deity, and I want to get married to my Shyama Sundar in Vrindavan, so please arrange that with Syamananda. So he was amazed, and actually he met Syamananda the next day, and they made an arrangement on an auspicious day for this beautiful deity of Radharani and the beautiful deity of Krishna to have a marriage ceremony. It's a pastime. They had a marriage ceremony, and at that marriage ceremony, the king, the queen, they came. They did this in Vrindavan. The king of Jaipur came, so it was all very wonderful. The kings both gave villages. The king of Bharatpur gave the village of Chatipur. You can have all the devotees. You can have the cows, the vegetables, the fruits. They'll always all go for Radhe Shyam's service. And the king of Jaipur gave a village of Shamali, also all those devotees, all the cows, all the fruit, all the vegetables. So this Shama. And the king of Bharatpur actually built a temple. It was him that built the temple. The original temple is still there now. Because he was a great devotee. So that had all happened. So he had a dream, Syamananda, that you have to go back. Please go back. There are many miscreants coming now in Orissa. Please go back. I want you to meet up with Rasikananda, who's a great Vaishnava. I want you to initiate him. And I want you together to preach in Orissa. So that's what happened. He returned to Orissa and just had Harinams everywhere. He did find out Rasikananda, who's a beautiful devotee. He's written various literatures, very saintly, humble, loving devotee, and together they became very close, and they just preached together all over Orissa and made many, many devotees. So as Syamananda was returning to Vrindavan, from Vrindavan to Orissa, he went through Agra. And in those days there were lots of tolls and you had to show papers. There were sadhus that didn't have papers. So the chief of police there, when he found that these sadhus didn't have papers, he arrested them and he threw them in jail. And then that night in jail, the chief of police had a dream, and he said, and in this dream, a fierce form of Lord Nrsimhadev came, and he said, "You release Syamananda and his disciples immediately." So he ran to the jail, and when he saw it, really looked at Syamananda, he saw, oh my gosh, he's so saintly. So he actually surrendered. He's a Muslim. He surrendered, and he took initiation from him. He became a very good preacher, a really good devotee. Anyway, he let them go, of course, and they went back to Orissa. So they were very triumphantly in Orissa, traveling around with the holy name, and Syamananda Pandit just had a mission. He was on a mission like Srila Prabhupada, and nothing could stop him. So one day they came to a town and had a huge Harinam in the marketplace, and there were hundreds of devotees there, really ecstatic. And there was a real devout Muslim king whose name was Sher Khan, and he heard about this. The soldiers came and told him about this, and he was like, right, you come with me. The next day we'll go. So they went along, big Harinam, and they started smashing the mridangas and beating the devotees and, causing them so much pain and angst in this kirtan. So the devotees, turned to Syamananda, and he called out, Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam. But he called it out just like when Prahlad was calling out when he was being tortured, or when Haridas Thakur was being beaten, and they called out to Krishna with all their love. So immediately the Muslims started to retch and vomit. They were vomiting blood. Their beards caught fire, and then they went down to their clothes. Their clothes caught fire, so they all had to run, and they had to jump into this lake. And this also happened with this old Muslim leader. His clothes caught fire. They jumped in the lake to put the flames out, and they were just stunned. How could this happen? And this Muslim leader went home, and he was dumbfounded. This could have happened, and he felt so humiliated. He just couldn't believe it. So at that night, as he slept, Allah came to him, and Allah said to him, What are you doing? Don't you see the name of Krishna and my name Allah is the same? And by the way, so is the same of Lord Chaitanya, who came to give this holy name. And the Muslim leader couldn't believe it. Anyway, so, he bowed down, to Allah, and then the next day he immediately went. Of course, they were having Harinam again, even though they'd had so much trouble the day before. There they were, blissfully chanting. So he bowed down to Syamananda Pandit, and he begged his forgiveness. And actually, this was 3 days, this sort of pastime that he'd been angry and then had the dream and gone. He actually could see this saintly person, and he became his disciple. This old Muslim became his disciple. And his name, the name that he gave him was Chaitanya Das. So we can just imagine the potency of this beautiful Syamananda, and together with Rasikananda, they really took Krishna consciousness, the holy name, just like Prabhupada took the holy name and he just took it all over the world and changed the world. So this is what Syamananda did in Orissa. He converted so many people to Vaishnavism. At one stage he was in a village called Gopivalapur. So they made a big festival, and he said, he said to his disciples, I want you to make this, or he said to, his disciples, I want you to make this a festival that will be, that will astonish everyone in the whole universe. So they called Vaishnavas from all over India, from as far as Dwarka, Ayodhya. They were called for this fantastic festival. And at this festival, there were most beautiful, wonderful kirtans. Everyone was ecstatic. And what they did was they bathed the feet of 100,000 Vaishnavas. And they kept that water. That water is still there in Gopi Vallabhpur. And Indradyumna Swami, when he was talking about this pastime, he said, I was given a cup of that water that had washed the feet of 100,000 Vaishnavas. So, of course, he was so famous from all this. So, I think that happened in 1620, and it was 1618 that anyway. So, in 1623 in Singapore, which is either near or it is Kanpur, in the Jesta month, Syamananda fell ill. And he asked his disciples to come. So they came. And he said to them, please do not make any efforts for my recovery. I've received a call from my Lord to come. So he said, perform kirtan day and night. Throughout your lives, perform kirtan as much as you possibly can. So they had a wonderful, beautiful, ecstatic kirtan, and he departed in that kirtan. So, the devotees, of course, they were so smitten. Rasikananda and the other devotees were very smitten. Rasikananda fainted 3 times just when he just couldn't take it in that this wonderful spiritual master had left. So they made the news spread very quickly, and rich and poor came to Singapore to lament his loss and honour him. So one samadhi was made there, and another samadhi was made in Vrindavan. At the Radhe Shyam temple, there's a samadhi nearby. So he's a very saintly, exemplary, beautiful Vaishnava. You know, we can simply take their example of the attachment to the holy name, the attachment to preaching, and try to imbibe that in our lives, because everything is so auspicious when we perform those activities of chanting with absorption and telling others, about Krishna. That's the most auspicious thing we can do with our lives. And so in that way we can honour these wonderful devotees who have sort of, they've taken that path to show us as a perfect example how to love Krishna, how to worship Krishna, how to go beyond the body and develop that relationship with Krishna. So we can also pray for their mercy on these holy days. We always pray to these departed or appearing Vaishnavas because they specially give their mercy on these days. So we can pray to him. We can think in his life, what would we most like to emulate? And we can pray to him for the strength and the grace from him to be able to do that. So, all glories to Sri Syamananda Pandit, and all glories to all these glorious Vaishnavas that we are able to find out about and get inspired by. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. If anybody has anything to say, or
that last Muslim leader you mentioned saying Allah appeared before him. I'm presuming Muslims say he doesn't have a form. I guess there was no description of what that.
No, there was no description. It just said Allah appeared and kind of chastised him. You can't sort of imagine, because they'll say that they've seen him in the burning bush or this or that. They never speak of a form, so we never hear that form just defined, do we?
Wonderful.
I was wondering, you were mentioning about the Apurva Leela, the unmanifest pastimes, and when
we know that Vrindavan is like 1,000 times, it's such a holy place. And the reason it's a holy place is because those pastimes did take place and are taking place. But in our covered state, we're not able to see that uppercut lila. And until, as we go on and on in our service and in our chanting, develop that deeper and deeper, then certain things are revealed to us. Maybe revealed to us about what's going on there. But you really sort of can feel. If you're sitting under a particular tree and some pastime has happened there, you can feel the auspiciousness. But we're too covered to actually, have that link to be able to go within the uppercut lila. But it doesn't mean it won't happen. And I'm sure that when Srila Prabhupada went there before he started this mission, he stayed most of the time on. Actually, he stayed at the Radha Madan Mohan temple, and he chanted and chanted and chanted and chanted, and prayed for the grace to be able to, go to the West and spread this movement. That's what he was praying for. But who knows what he saw? And that we can't say what. I was just thinking of some story. I can't remember it well enough. About seeing those pastimes and then covering them. So that's all up to Krishna, what we see, what we don't see, and if and when we come to that stage, that's all up to Krishna, to be able to get that window. But we can pray, and the main thing is to be so sincere in our chanting and our service that Krishna, wants to reveal, because our relationship with Krishna is highly reciprocative. So the more we actually give our heart to Krishna, the more he reciprocates. And who knows what each of us is destined to actually be able to see. We can't say. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Syamananda Panditji ki Jai.